Welcome, everyone, to the seventh episode of the APAMSA podcast. From roundtable discussions of current health topics to recaps of our panels with distinguished leaders in the healthcare field to even meeting current student leaders within the organization, this is White Coats and Rice. My name is James Chua, second year medical student at Toro, Nevada, and the current fundraising director at APAMSA. I'll be your host for today. For today's episode, we have Paul Tominez, a fourth-year medical student at UCSF School of Medicine and a proud graduate of UC Davis, where he received his degree in pharmaceutical chemistry. During his time in APAMSA, he has served as the Region 8 director and now serves as one of the membership vice presidents on the executive board. Originally from the island of Guam, Paul is an Army Health Professions Scholarship Program recipient, and he is recently matched into, well, stay tuned for the rest of the episode to find out where, but spoiler, it's another island. As a former collegiate rower and high school athlete, Paul's interests include staying on top of his fitness by running and working out. He's also an avid solo traveler, having a total of 5 countries under his belt this year. Without further ado, join us as we explore Paul's incredible journey in medicine, his insights on leadership, and the unique passions that shape his inspiring story. Paul, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, James. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, we want to get as many of the executive board members on this podcast just so we have a very more clear insight onto who you guys are, because you guys are like the leaders. You guys are shaping basically the next generation of APAMSA. But
Yeah, we're kind of this weird enigma in APAMS that we have all the directors reaching out to our local chapters, so we kind of just work in the background, and a lot of people don't get to meet us in person.
yeah, you guys are pulling all the strings. But before we get on to the interesting questions we have in store for you, I have a couple questions of myself just so I and our viewers or listeners can get to know you better.
Yeah, of course.
So, first, you are a plant dad.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I guess I started my collection in medical school. I think it was during my second year. But growing up is actually where I started taking care of plants. So growing up in an island, we had this big yard that was basically ours to do whatever we wanted to. So my dad would plant a lot of fruits and vegetables. My mom would plant all of her flowers and other more decorative plants. And from the earliest age I can recall, helping them in the garden in the afternoon. Like I'd get off school, change, and then we'd be outside, playing with my dogs, planting things, getting things like harvesting whatever we had growing that summer. And then in high school, I kind of cleared out this plot of land, and we actually built rows like a farm, and we had like a bunch of eggplant, papaya. I think we had cucumbers and maybe several pineapple plants and dragon fruit. And my dad was in the army, so he deployed I think later that summer. So I was the one mainly taking care of it, and it was actually pretty relaxing. And I kind of lost touch with that during undergrad. Didn't have any plans in Davis. But then in medical school, I stopped by Home Depot one day and was kind of just strolling around as one does in Home Depot. And I picked up 2 plants, and then now I have an entire collection sitting by my window. And I think I probably have an addiction, but I that needs some control.
Wow. How many plants? What would you say your favorite plant is?
I think it was the first one I got. So it's called a ficus artery. But the interesting story behind that is that so back in Guam, the other name for ficus artery is called the tatamuna tree. So tatamuna are the spirits back home in Guam, that kind of watch over you, and you don't disrespect them. So it's or another word for it is these are big banyan trees, like the massive ones you kind of see in the movies with all the things hanging down on the sides. Um, so I didn't know that at first. I didn't know this was the same plant. So now I playfully think that I have a big banyan tree growing in my apartment with spirits that may or may not be there. And it's been growing really, really well. It was a super easy plant to start off with. And um, spoiler, unfortunately, I'll have to get rid of all of my plants at the end of the year, but we'll get to that soon.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll go to a very good home. It's also interesting though because so you grew up to some degree like growing your own fruits and vegetables, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We also had like calamansi. My Nino had like tangerines in his yard. I remember seeing bananas. I mean, obviously an island having like a bunch of coconuts and avocado, mangoes. Yeah, a lot of like very tropical fruits, which I took for granted. And then coming out to California, it's like, oh shoot, you don't have the same kind of fruits that we have back home.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I also so I'm in Vegas, a very desert climate environment. One of the first things that my dad gave to me as a gift was a potted calamansi tree, and it was already fruiting, right?
Mhm.
But like lo and behold, my roommate. So I kept it indoors, right? And I was told you can keep it in its pot for like 5 or so years, and I was like, perfect. By the time I'm done with medical school, I'll know where I am for residency, and I can put it like in the ground.
Mhm.
But then I kept it inside, and then my roommate kind of got mad because he was like, yo, I think these are kind of toxic to dogs, and I'm worried that my dog is going to eat them all. And I was like, oh man. So I had to move it outside, and then within a week, it just shriveled up.
Oh no. I
It's
didn't
fine.
know they were toxic to dogs because we have plants back home, and I mean, I guess I've never seen my dogs eat it, but
I am not studying to be a veterinarian, and I cannot speak on how strict of a dog father my roommate is, which, it's whatever. But in any case, enough about plants. I want to talk a little bit more about your medical journey because I think that's why we're all here. We want to get to know, you know, what motivates you and what drove you to become a physician. But even before that, something when I was reading about your history, something that I was really interested in is you received your degree basically in farm.
Yeah.
How does that translate? How did that like translate over to medical school? Like were you considering becoming a pharmacist first or something like that?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think I decided my major back in high school. I knew I really liked my chemistry teacher and the class. I took AP Chem and really, really enjoyed the topic. So I kind of knew I wanted to major in chemistry in college. Um, kind of jumping ahead. So for college, at Davis, there's a general chemistry major which I had applied into, but then I was kind of going through the requirements, and it required like linear algebra, a bunch more like complicated math topics, which I had no interest in taking. But they had pharmaceutical chemistry as an option, and that aligned a lot better with the pre-med requirements. So I went into I went into undergrad knowing that I wanted to be a doctor already.
Mm-hmm.
So I switched majors because it was a little bit more easier to integrate the requirements for medical school while also avoiding the death of like linear algebra, super extensive like quantum physics. And I'm glad I was able to switch pretty easily because I had a few friends taking those classes and I don't think I would have survived taking those.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate. When I went to my undergraduate, the University of San Diego, I received my degree in biology, just general bio, no specific like
Mhm.
specialty within it. But I remember like I was doing really well in my chemistry classes, so I thought I was like, oh, maybe I should major in like biochemistry instead. And then, I love chemistry. I love organic chemistry too. But then when they started recommending, like, oh, you have to take like inorganic chemistry or you have to take all of these like really niche chemistries, I was like, oh, this is not for me. And I also like on a similar note to your linear algebra, for us one of the requirements is like calculus 1. And so if you're a biochem major, you had to take calculus 2. And I was like, I didn't even need to take AP calculus or like calculus here because I took AP calculus and that covered it. So I was like, I can't do any more math, guys. Like physics is going to be the end of it.
I know, yeah, because I didn't make that change until maybe three-quarters of the way into my first year of college. So I was already taking like the calculus for engineers, and that that definitely was like a rough time. I wish I'd made that decision a little bit earlier, but hindsight is 2020. And then, yeah, I'm glad I kind of switched out of it because I had to take one semester of physical chemistry and took it during the pandemic, and that was a rough time. And I'm glad I avoided the subsequent classes that would have followed after that.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. I I can only imagine how difficult that journey may have been, but hey, it got you to UCSF nevertheless. So,
It did, yes.
yeah, but even so, before we talk more about your medical journey, I want to talk about your traveling journey. So,
hmm
5 countries this year, huh?
hmm Yeah, yeah, 5 countries this year.
And have all of them been solo?
Yes, they have all, or I guess technically they've all been solo. One of them, my friend joined along, but he could not continue on with the trip with the trip because of some other like personal reasons. But for the most part, yeah, they were all solo. This is my first time traveling solo internationally. The other few times I've been international was with my family. And it's been something I've been thinking about doing for the longest time, but I was always scared to do it. One, because traveling internationally by yourself, you don't know what to do if there's something that goes wrong. Like, how do you like ask for help? I was also worried about the language barrier, navigating public transportation, but things actually worked out really, really nicely.
Yeah. So, which 5 countries did you end up, or like 5 places did you end up visiting?
Yeah, so I took my first trip in September of this past year. So I went to London first, and then I took the Eurostar to Brussels in Belgium. And then I went down to Paris and I went up to Amsterdam. I spent about, I think I was gone for 10 days, 10, 11 days. And then I recently got back from Montreal. I spent, I think I left the day after Thanksgiving. I spent like 5 or 6 days there.
Yeah. How did you find the time to do that being a third/fourth year in rotations?
Yeah, I guess one of the nice things about UCSF is that once you submit your ERAS application, your schedule kind of lightens up very, very nicely. So over the span of like September until now, I've had a very like light class schedule. I only had one rotation that I had to do. I'll be going back to the hospital in a couple of weeks. So I was doing quote unquote research during the time.
Oh,
So I was able to do that on the side while also getting to travel internationally. I saved up a lot of credit card points, so they would pay for my hotels very nicely. And yeah, it was a nice experience. I'm hoping to take a few more trips, hopefully before graduation.
yeah. No, I really, so since I'm only a second year and I don't know how truly rigorous rotations are, I'm always like, I know match for us normal folk, for us civilians, is in March, right? And so I'm just hoping that when March rolls around, it's like, oh, from March to May, and May is our graduation. It's like, all right, everyone, let's go on the vacation that we all talked about for 4 years.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Even
Yeah,
before that too, like if you're able to get all your rotations done, like just advice for anybody who's able to do this. If you're able to pack everything earlier on, let's say finish in like I know a lot of my friends are finishing in like December, January. So between February until graduating, they're traveling the world, staying at home, doing whatever they want. So if you have if your school has the capability to kind of push things a little bit earlier on in your fourth year, definitely I would take that.
yeah. Well, since we're already on the topic of medical school and all of that, let's just start. What, so I kind of spoiled it just a little bit in the beginning, but what field or specialty of medicine are you interested in and why?
Yeah, so I applied into general surgery this past summer. So once again, I'm one of the Army HPSB recipients. So our match process is a little bit earlier. We found out our results a few weeks ago. So I matched into general surgery at Triple Army Medical Center in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Yeah, the Pink Hospital, correct?
Yes, the Pink Hospital, and they currently have a big, I guess, Christmas tree outside. You could see it from from like off the cliff.
Yeah. No, it's funny. So I was actually very interested. So let's dive more into this. So you mentioned that your dad is in the army, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So did that play a big role into you choosing the Army HPSP, or did it play a big role in you choosing Gen Surge?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I guess For the army specifically, so my grandpa was also in the military. I think he served in the Korean War, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. And then my dad was serving in the army for I think 33 years. And then a bunch of my cousins are also in the army, not in the army, but in the Air Force. And then I went to what's called a Dodea school, which is like a school for all military kids and federal workers to have their like children go to the same like campus. So I was surrounded by a lot of like Department of Defense people and children. So that was definitely a big influence. And then I guess for me, the financial aspect of it was a big part because being from Guam, you're not considered in state for anywhere besides University of Hawaii. So the cost of medical school would have been egregiously expensive for me wherever I went. So it kind of helped take off that financial burden of being able to attend medical school.
Gotcha. Something that I don't share with a lot of people, but I guess I'm gonna share with every person listening, is that so my dad was also in the army, and so for a brief moment I was really interested in doing HPSP. But also on that note, since my dad, when he was active duty, he was once stationed in Washington in Tacoma. And so that's actually
Oh,
where I was born. I was born in Madigan. And so
oh, nice.
yeah. So I always think to myself that even though I'm in M2 right now, that maybe one day, like, I could sort of circle back and end my story in like Seattle slash Washington, like that's where I was born and that's where I would like
Mhm.
want to end my career, But yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I did a rotation up. So I did a rotation up there at Madigan for 4 weeks this past summer, and they have an excellent general surgery program, and they actually have a few civilian doctors who work at the hospital. So, I mean, if you're interested in general surgery, you can definitely work up there.
Maybe. I'm currently I'm currently interested in psychiatry, but you know, you know things really could change. And on that
Oh
similar
yeah,
note,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because when I was again doing my research about you, 2 years ago on your APAMSA bio, it said that you were interested in emergency med. So
Mhm.
why did you switch from emergency to gen surge?
Yeah, so I think during my third year, I had so many life crises of what I wanted to do in medicine. So I came into medical school thinking I wanted to do emergency medicine. That was like the only thing I wanted to do. That's mainly because I did research in emergency medicine during undergrad and during my gap year. I really liked the big, I guess, catchment of patients that you get to see. So it's a very wide patient population. Like everyone ends up in the emergency room at some point, unfortunately, in their life. So you get to see a wide array of presentations. Your ability to come up with different differentials very quickly, to provide critical care in a very like the opportunity to do that in a very resource limited setting was something that was very attractive to me. And then also kind of working as like the quarterback to coordinate care for all these patients who are coming into the hospital. So whether they can go home safely, whether they need to be admitted, whether they need to stay in the emergency room for a couple more hours to maybe a day or so. That was what really drove me to the field, and also the flexibility. So I heard that you can pile your shifts earlier on in the month and then kind of take the last half of the month free, whether that be traveling, teaching, doing research, and so on. Um, but then during my third year, I got more exposed to the different specialties. So I kind of got more interested in internal medicine because I really liked the depth of knowledge that they had for all the different specialties and being able to coordinate care more long term for these patients. And oftentimes, when you care for patients in the hospital, like the relationship you build with them is very intense. So you're caring for them, let's say, over the span of 2 to 3 days for upwards of several weeks, and you get to see them every single day. You get to see them progressing, changing their clinical status changing, which you don't necessarily see in emergency medicine because oftentimes you give them to a consultant or admit them to the hospital for medicine or they get discharged. You do get to see some repeat patients who come in frequently, but you don't really get that long-term care that a hospitalist will get. So kind of got interested in being more like in the hospital, like on the wards through internal medicine. But I still like the idea of critical care. So I thought of, okay, let's do a critical care elective or a pulmonology elective because, I really like, unfortunately, very like very sick patients. I like the complexity that they have behind them. And then I finally had my general surgery rotation. It was, I personally, I always felt like surgery could be an option for me, but I had never gotten any exposure to that. So I'm the first one to go to medical school in my family. I didn't have any exposure to surgery beforehand. But when I got to the OR, I was like, wow, like this is an incredible environment. My first exposure was through a pediatric urology elective where on my very first day being in the OR, the fellow handed me the scalpel, held the skin taut, and allowed me to do the first incision. I was like, this is insane. Like, I've never held a scalpel before, never had cut anyone before, and here he was allowing me to do something. So that kind of like stuck with me. And throughout the 2 weeks of that elective, they continued to allow me to do different things. They taught me how to suture things closed. They taught me how to tie things. One day it was just me and the attending, so I was basically opening for the case with just the attending, again with limited experience as a medical student, which was a very like incredible like memory that I'll continue to take with me going forward. And then I had my actual general surgery rotation the week after for 2 months. So I did 4 weeks of vascular surgery and then 4 weeks of acute care surgery. For my time on vascular surgery, I liked it because, again, the patients were very critically ill. So a lot of the vascular patients have multiple comorbidities. The cases are very long and complex. I think the longest case I was in was maybe, I want to say 6 or 7 hours. And I think that was only planned for like a 45 to hour and a half case. So it ended up just being, at one point, it was just me and the fellow trying to figure out like what to do. And I was like assisting the fellow in like trying to get hemostasis and like holding things with like the forceps and cutting things, which was a very good experience. And then a lot of the patients end up going to the ICU, so I kind of got to see that you get to do surgery, but you also still get to care for these critically ill patients as like the primary team. So it kind of combined two interests that I had. And then the following month, so I did acute care surgery, which is basically the consulting service for general surgery. So what that means is that whenever I guess the hospital service needs like a consult from surgery, you'll call the acute care service. So whether that be for like a bowel obstruction or let's say in the emergency room they're admitted for appendicitis or cholecystitis, you call that service to do their surgery in the hospital. And I really like that service because there's a lot of running around. So I think at one point our list ballooned up to like 30 some to 40 some patients. So we our patient list was too thick that we couldn't staple it together. And I really liked the one again running around, so running between the OR and the floor to check on patients. We just had a bunch of cases going on it throughout the day. I felt like the residents allowed me to do a lot. So one, care for the patients, write the notes, of course, and then also in the OR, getting to close, getting to drive the camera for a lot of the laparoscopic cases, and then closing, of course, with the honestly with just the attending at times, which kind of stuck with me as well. And then the very last case of my rotation was an X lap, and that was the first X lap that I had ever seen. And when we'd gone into the opened the body cavity, the blood was just gushing out of the patient, unfortunately. But that really stuck with me because I got to see how quickly these general surgeons had to think to figure out what's going on, um, and while also again using their hands to like look around like to see where the source of bleeding is. And I really liked how like quick on their feet they were thinking, but also being able to make like a difference in the moment at that time that you don't necessarily get to see in other specialties. And this emphasis of using your hands, think critically, very sick patients, continued to stick with me through all of my through like all the other general surgery rotations that I did. Even in my gyne surgery rotations where they allowed me to do a lot of things in the OR, continued to stick with me. Um, and ultimately, like it was the teachers who I had in the OR that drove me more and more towards that general surgery path.
That I can see why you have felt like so inspired to pursue this specific route. I think in my own experiences, it's so even before, so I mentioned I was interested in psychiatry, but prior to this, I was interested in infectious diseases. And I think that was from all of my mentors throughout my like undergraduate and post grad time. Like they were the ones who like wrote off however many hours I shadowed them in the hospital for applications. But when I
Mhm.
went with them and learning from them and getting inspired by them, like I think that's what really propels us forward, especially in our medical like journey, you know?
Mhm.
But
Yeah, it truly is. It ultimately your clerkship year is decided by who you're working with. Like you can have a tremendous attending who gets you involved with the cases and teaches you a lot and allows you to do a lot of things. Or you can have the opposite of where you're basically just shadowing as a medical student, which may not be the, the most exciting thing in the world. So your teachers, your mentors, your attendings, even your residents will make or break your clinical rotation.
absolutely. But I think, you know, medical school has its, you know, ups and downs. And so we talked a lot about all of the ups right now and how great your rotations have been. I'm sort of curious, like, about the antithesis of that. Like, what has been the more challenging part of your medical journey? You know, like, was it in med school? Was it in undergrad?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I've struggled a lot throughout my life.
We all have, yeah.
Um, I think so. I moved away from Guam at the ripe age of 18. I think I was only 18 for like 2 weeks before starting undergrad. So I think that was a pretty big struggle trying to figure out how to be an adult, how to manage being a college student, making new friends, building a new support system in a place that was completely unfamiliar without any existing family in like a several 100-mile radius was pretty challenging. So that first couple of like quarters in undergrad, it was like hard. Like I wanted to go home almost every single day. I was trying to call my parents every single day. The time difference alone made it hard to be able to make that connection, right? So I think towards like halfway through, I was like, oh, like this is too much. I'm gonna transfer back home and kind of just go to school back in Guam. But I stuck through it. I was able to find community through my club rowing team, but built a lot of lifelong friends that kind of gave me more balance for school. So we had the school side, and then I would be working out with my teammates. So that kind of helped to keep me cemented at UC Davis. And then as the years went on, I continued to feel more and more comfortable with being in Davis, buying my own groceries, doing laundry, cleaning and whatever, and then also managing being a pre-med. And then kind of experienced the same, I guess, adjustment in medical school. It wasn't a big move, so Davis is only what, like an hour and a half from SF if there's no traffic. But again, San Francisco is a very different place than Davis. I always joke around that Davis was a nice stepping stone for me, going from an island in the Pacific to California to a small college town, now being in a city of 900,000 people. So I kind of had that same similar like adjustment, trying to find like, okay, who do I connect with? How do I manage medical school? How do I navigate being in a new city? Manage being able to drive in a city. I just got in my car a year before, so figuring out how to drive in this very cramped and dense city. But I continue to adjust. I think the hardest parts for medical school is that you're surrounded by such tremendous people who've done incredible work, both your colleagues, your classmates, the residents, the attendings. And oftentimes you can feel like, wow, like, am I good? Am I good enough? Like, am I good enough for this? Am I putting in enough work? Um, but being able to acknowledge that, like, you've done the work, you're here, you've made it, like, you're going to be a doctor at the end of the day, and to remind yourself that constantly really does help to kind of manage your expectations. Um, I think being able to build like good work-life balance is something that I'm continuing to work on. I think I built it pretty nicely during my first year and a half, but during clerkships, it kind of took the back seat because of how much you're trying to learn, how long your hours end up being. You kind of I personally tried to prioritize as much learning as I could for clerkships while at the expense of like my personal well-being. So now that I'm in my fourth year, I'm trying to rebuild like all the hobbies I kind of lost over the last year, solo traveling, taking care of my plants, um, and hopefully build that like routine for residency coming up in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, I can definitely speak as well on how important it is to maintain, these hobbies that you have that keep you grounded during medical school. I remember prior to medical school, I used to go to the gym fairly regularly, but then when MS1 started, I was just like no time for studying or no time for working out, all time for studying. And I think that was just me being like I was just not prioritizing what needed to truly be prioritized. And that's, your physical and mental health first.
Mhm.
And so now that we're in our second year, it's kind of, people say it's pretty wild, but for me, my personal schedule is that I wake up at 3 a.m. to go to the
Oh my
gym.
gosh.
Yeah. And so, but mind you, that means I go to bed at like 9 to 10. So I'm
Mhm.
still getting about like 6-ish hours of sleep.
Mhm.
But I just like starting off my day with that one thing that like is so routine, because things
Mhm.
are so rapidly changing and it's hard to stay grounded. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, kind of speaking to that. Yeah, I mean, I used to go to the gym a lot, especially during undergrad and honestly during my first year and a half of medical school. But during clerkships, your schedule is not really your own. So being able to fit in like what brings you joy during that time, like it's a struggle because you can always study more, you can always try to get more sleep, but you really have to make time for the things that bring you joy, whether that be your hobbies, whether that be working out, whether that be like, working on your mental health or even meeting up with your friends because for clerkships, like everyone's spread across the city or the Bay Area or wherever you're going to medical school. And it's hard to talk to people at times. It can feel very isolating, especially if you're the only medical student on your team. So making sure you also like maintain the connections you make during the first year and a half, having people you can rely on to kind of like decompress, talk about what you've been experiencing like during your clinical day, can really like change your experience overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we've taken the time to talk about, all of the highs and your incredible rotations in surgery and how that inspired you. And we talked about the lows and all of the challenges that shaped you into the medical student you are today. I'm now curious what we can expect for the future. So, in other words, if we had a crystal ball for you and we were trying to predict your future medical career, what is the one thing you are looking most forward to now that you're going to be what, an O1? O1 and is that not the term? Like for officers, isn't that not?
Yeah, so I'll actually be a captain, which is an
Oh,
03 in the
three? Oh my gosh.
yeah.
So you're
Mhm.
skipping a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was
So
skipping it to you.
yeah, yeah. Skipping second and
um
first lieutenant.
I'm actually a second lieutenant right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for medical school, you commission as an O1, and then once you graduate, you become an O3.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Well, in any case, what do you look forward to in your future medical career or even military career?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on this before, but it was all again, my decision to go into surgery was based off the residence and attending that I had. So I'm really, really looking forward to being able to teach as a physician. Over the past couple months, or even over the past year, I've been leading a lot of like suturing workshops, not tying, and I've also been tutoring for the School of Medicine, and I've really enjoyed my time being able to teach younger medical students like all the knowledge that I've gathered over the past several years. And I think at least at Tripler, they do an excellent job of trying to emphasize like teaching for medical students. So I'm looking forward to being in that resident position and being able to have like all these chalks talks and teaching medical students how to like suture and knot tie and all like the different surgical pearls. And then ultimately, I would love to continue mentoring like medical students and pre-meds and others like people in general who are interested in medicine, because I feel like a lot of wisdom can be passed down through the experience that you live. Um, like everyone's journey is going to be different, but being able to hear like what other people's journeys were like and what the life lessons they took away from that can really help someone kind of navigate this you know, this foggy field of medicine that often for people who don't have family in medicine itself can be kind of difficult to navigate at times.
Yeah, absolutely. That intergenerational connection between like generations and generations of physicians, it really carries on, and I look forward to the day when, you're an attending and APAMSA can call back to you so that you can mentor another bright-eyed future captain and give them that guidance.
Mhm.
But yeah, in any case, thank you for sharing so much about your medical journey. We've really learned so much about, your professional side, and the academic side. But I wanted to end the podcast more of on a lighter note. And I've been asking every single person we do this one-on-one series with a bunch of, this or that questions, just so we can end on a more goofier note. It's just going to be A or B, just choose one. You can give an explanation, but it can be pretty rapid fire. I have actually found that every single person I've interviewed has to always pause and then expand upon. So feel free to do that as well.
All right, I'll try to be as rapid fire as possible.
All right, in that case, I'll just give it to you then. Okay, so first, city or beach?
Beach,
Cats or dogs?
dogs.
Text or call?
What was that? Sorry, one more time.
Text or call?
Text,
Black or white?
black,
Morning or night?
morning,
Summer or winter?
summer,
Okay. Breakfast or dinner?
breakfast.
Would you rather have the power to be invisible or the power to read minds?
Uh, be invisible.
You're actually the first person to answer that.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I think my anxiety would kind of go off the chain, off the rails if I could read people's minds.
yeah. Would you rather have 100,000 to spend on yourself or 1 million you could only spend on others?
A million to spend on others.
We have such kind-hearted guests. Everybody says that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then finally, for our final this or that question, would you rather retake step one or retake the MCAT?
Oh, I think I'd rather retake the MCAT, unfortunately.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you
Yeah, I
why.
think I'm the first one who probably said that, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Um, I don't know. I really like basic sciences. I mean, I was a chemistry major, so like that wasn't like an issue for me. Really loved biology, so that biology and biochem, so that was like fine. The only issue was the car section, which I think I could do better if I actually practice cars. And then this like sociology is like, yeah, you just do the flashcards. So yeah.
Yeah,
Step one was rough for me.
fair enough. Yeah, I really thought we were gonna have like a 100% unanimous step one answer.
Oh, really?
Way to break the mold. So that's crazy. That's wild. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our this or that segment. Thank you for your honesty. As we wrap up this episode of White Coats and Rice, we love to close out our one-on-one series seeking advice from our incredible guests. So, Paul, what is one piece of advice you'd like to share with someone navigating the journey of medicine slash medical school?
Yeah. I think making it your own journey is a big one. I think there's so many different ways to be successful in this field, and ultimately it will be your own experience in the end. So take all the advice that you get, take all the experiences that you see with a grain of salt, integrate it into your decisions, but ultimately make the decision because you want to do it. No one else can make the decision for you, or people will try to make the decision for you, but ultimately, again, like it's your career, your life. So building that confidence to be able to navigate this incredible field of medicine um, with confidence is it can be challenging at times, but once you start to build, the repetition of doing that, life gets a lot easier.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Paul, for sharing all so much about you. It has really been such an honor to have you on the podcast. Just thank you for sharing your incredible journey from the beginnings on the island of Guam to, to where you're headed next to the island of Hawaii. But It has been so inspiring. If our listeners want to contact you, his current APAMSA email is membership@apamsa.org. Feel free to shoot him in a question. If there's something you want to learn more about, whether it's maybe military health scholarships or, anything like that, I'm sure he's an open book. To everyone tuning in, we hope you found this conversation as meaningful as we did. Be sure to join us next time for more stories that uplift and connect. And we hope to see you all at the National Conference at Duke University this upcoming March 7 to 9, 2025. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for having me.